So good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Global Networking Forum organized by the Amaldi Foundation under the theme Investing in Space Startups, the Revolution during 2020. So during this event, we would like to discuss the investment ecosystem and scenario of the investment in space startups with a specific focus on the new space economy ecosystem and what happened to the investments during the year 2020 due to the COVID-19 outbreak. But without any further ado, let me introduce you our eminent speakers. We have with us Maria Cristina Falvella. She is president of the Amaldi Foundation and Inspector General at the Italian Space Agency. We have Lorenzo Scatena, Secretary General at the Amaldi Foundation, Augusto Cramarossa, Head of Strategic Coordination Area at the Italian Space Agency, Manishar, Head of Analytics at Bryce Technologies, and Luca Del Monte, Head of the Industrial Policy and SME Division at the European Space Agency. So I hand over the floor to Maria Cristina Falvella for the introduction, greetings and remarks.
Thank you, Eleonora, and good afternoon to everybody. Just to give you a little the framework of this initiative, organized by Fondazione Edoardo Amaldi Foundation, a small foundation born in 2017 after the strong commitment of the Italian Space Agency and the private research consortium IPAZIA to set up a new model for applied research aimed to technology from and to space sector. We focus to leverage space investment as a tool for increasing the competitiveness and the sustainability of the national companies and to maximize the socio-economic benefits from space applied research. And this is why we organize this Global Network Forum. Space is indeed still not like a traditional sector, and there are a list of crucial elements which prevent the full exploitation of the space investment and capabilities based on private investment. Worldwide, governments are still the main investor in space activities, and although there are many public initiatives around the world that support the development of space economy and growth of commercial activities, available data today on space economy show that the growth of commercial space activities up to 2019 was modest overall, and in particular in Europe, and should not be overestimated. A crucial point is indeed the capability to create the condition to facilitate the spillover and the spin-out effects. The new space economy should maximize the socio-economic impact of space investment and at the same time open opportunities for new approach to innovation, also outside the space sector, for broad industrial transformation, creating a network of interconnected small companies, as well as greater needs from demand side, often linked to the societal grand challenges. However, the evolution of space sector versus this new paradigm is still a puzzle, and keep discussing open issue to transform the asset of the know-how achieved in activities and projects with socio-economic impact in terms of volume of activities, jobs, companies, enabling service, and utmost important, users. This process assumes a consistent increasing involvement of private non-space stakeholders willing to invest in the short-medium term and generating a public-private ecosystem for many tech startups, generally small, early stage, and risky. Small-scale industry and startup can indeed play a role in opening disruptive line of business and facilitate the involvement of newcomers. They are important candidates for development niche markets and a valuable partner also for large integrator, which have a new chance to consolidate and update the value chain. The GNF of today aims to discuss the evolution of the investment scenario during the 2020. The pandemic has, at every level, generated growing concern and a general decrease of investment. This situation turned in a big opportunity for the startups, which took risk in proposing innovative solutions from space sector to non-space user. We intend today to briefly deliver an analysis on what happened, both at national and European level, and to present the point of view of some key successful precursors of smart industrial policy in Europe, in order to evaluate both issue and potential benefit also in the short term, because the startup space economy is a short-term issue. Not to spoil what we will come after, let me conclude now, welcoming all our distinguished speakers and wishing you an interesting and fruitful panel. Thanks a lot for your kind attention and enjoy the GNF.
So thank you very much to Maria Cristina Falvella for this introductive keynote. I would now like to open the discussion with our speakers, and I suggest we start analyzing the topic of today at global level. So I would like to start with Manishar, that, as we said, is head of analytics at Bricetech. So Mani, we know that Bricetech is elaborating every year a report on the trends of investments in space startups. So according to your studies and your analysis, what do you see the trends of the last 5 years in investments, and how the investments in space startups were affected by COVID-19?
Thank you, Eleonora. I will just grab the clicker. It's a pleasure to be here with you all at this really exciting event, and I will just be going over some analysis that we do at Bricetech. Trying the clicker. Doesn't work. Next slide, please. Oh, too far. So just a quick overview of what we do. We are an analytics and consulting company based in the US and the UK. We provide support to governments and companies around all topic areas, from policy strategy through to understanding of what the market is looking like for different companies. So we have a number of our reports, including the one I'm quoting from today, on our website, and there's a lot more detail in the report. So I recommend you check it out to get more insights alongside other reports that we publish for free, no cost. So with that, just highlight some high-level kind of trends that we have been tracking. We've been tracking data from the year 2000, and this is covering all private investment into startup space companies. So by private investment, that is meant to mean companies that are angel or venture capital backed, and I don't know why it went back. Yeah, so as you can see, this chart is quite phenomenal in the striking way the exponential trends that you see over the last few years. Particularly in 2015, there was a sudden jump in the number of in the amount being invested, but also the number of investments taking place. We saw increased diversity in the investors as well. They were dominated by investors from the US historically, but this has grown more and more to include European and international investors in Asia and elsewhere. Okay. So this chart goes into some of that overview of where the concentration of the investors is around the world. And as you can see, the color coding is that the darker it is, the more highly concentrated in terms of number of investors there are. And you can see that the US is in the leading country in terms of the number of investors, but also in the amount being invested. And then China is also leading in terms of investment, and Europe is not too far behind. So hopefully that gives you a nice kind of summary overview of what we're seeing in terms of the data behind all of the investment that's taking place. And when it comes to identifying all these investment, we look at a variety of sources. So if you look at the report and you find that there is some investment is missing that we should include, then please reach out. So just a note on that. But excited to be on this panel to continue the conversation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Manny, for this global overview. I would now like to pass over the European ecosystem, so introducing Luca Del Monte, Head of Industrial Policy and SMEs Division at the European Space Agency. So what do you think is the status of the European space startups ecosystem? And still, how do you see the impact of COVID-19 from the ESA perspective?
Good afternoon, everybody. Thanks. That's, I would say, two questions in one. Maybe, let's say, just from what Manny has shown, there is a striking evidence of a disparity of private investments in Europe with respect to the rest of the world. I mean, just to give you the real size of this phenomenon is that we should compare what Manny has just shown now, these 8 billion, for instance, of euros that have been invested by private investors globally, to the 72, 73 billions of euros that globally are spent by governments. So you have a proportion, let's say we are talking about 12%. So nowadays, private investment globally represents are more or less 12% of what are the public spending. When you see the similar figures for Europe, you discover that in Europe we are talking about 500 million euros to be compared with about 12 billion of public investment. So this means that it is roughly 4%. So this means that the proportion it's basically 3 times smaller in Europe than what it should be. So here we have a first problem that is a problem of volume of investments. So we have few investors in Europe that are credibly taking seriously space as an option for their risks. But there is also a problem of flow, not just volume, but flow. Because one thing that is not shown there is that only 5% of the global private investments worldwide, so the 8 billions, are captured by European companies. 5%. So there is a problem of volume, a problem of flow of these investments. COVID did not make this situation easier, of course, although the space sector has shown quite good resiliency. Let's say, because as you know, I mean, it's a sector that is characterized by very long lead time, but there is a big but, is the fact that especially companies that are under contract with ESA, that still represents the largest public source of funding in Europe, are mostly working under a fixed firm and fixed price type of contract. What does it mean? It means that it's true that they have a backlog, a significant backlog in front of them, but it's also true that they have been experiencing delays and cost increase. Let's say almost, if I'm not wrong, it's something like an average of 8.5 weeks of delays during the first period of the COVID. That represents basically 53% of delays during that period. This represents, you can translate it immediately in cost increase to be compared with a firm and fixed price contract. This means that the profit margin is eroded. And the net result is that when the profit margin of the companies of industry is eroded, there is less propension to make investments in innovation. And what happens is that if you don't invest in innovation, the net result is that then the competitiveness of our industry on the global market is immediately impacted. So we will unfortunately see the effects of this COVID crisis not today, but in the next few years, when there will be a secondary effect also arriving, that is the scarcity of let's say, the rising price of materials, and also the scarcity in provision of components. So this we are already seeing in sectors like automotive. This is coming very quickly, has already started to impact also our industry. So we have also two secondary effects that are arriving.
All right, thank you very much, Luca, for this introduction on the European landscape and also explaining a bit the role of private and ISA investments. Now, going a little bit into the Italian landscape, I would like to ask Augusto Cramarossa, is Head of Strategic Coordination Area at the Italian Space Agency. So we have seen during 2020 that the Italian Space Agency has heavily invested in some COVID-19 invitation to tender, especially for healthcare and education. So what's the, a bit the overview and landscape of space, SMEs and startups in Italy from your perspective?
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone, and thanks for the invitation. Yes, I would like to try to provide also some information regarding the national scenario. I will be very brief. I will mention some numbers. We have, I would like also to inform you that the Italian Space Agency, together with the Italian Trade Association, has developed and issued a revision of a catalog that is reporting at least information of about 200 Italian companies. And so that is also in our website, the Italian Space Agency website. In this catalog, the main information are the following. We have approximately 13% of startups, 70% of SME. This is very important information because the SME are really the main network of the Italian companies, and 17% of large system integrator. 62% of this company are involved in downstream, and this is another important information because, as you know, we are trying at European level and also national level to increase as much as possible the development of downstream services and application using space data, and 38%, the remaining part, is working in upstream. We have, as Italian Space Agency, very strong relationship with the Italian industrial associations, and we work with them very well in order to receive their comments, their suggestions that help us in preparing the strategies. We have also very good relations with a lot of Italian universities, and we are now at the end of a very important studies made with the University of Milano on the impacts and the effect generated by the expenditure, by the funding done by the Italian Space Agency on the national scenario. And this helps us in understanding better which may be the best line of action for the Italian Space Agency. I would like to mention also that in Italy we have, but I will come back on this point later. We have two ISA Business Innovation Center. The first one located in close to our agency in the big Lazio in Rome, and then we are now starting another big in Turin. So we have a lot of initiatives that are trying to support, in particular, the startup and the SMEs in Italy, including through the Italian Trade Association, to help them to participate to international events. So regarding, in particular, the question that you asked me, yes, we have, together with ISA, in the framework of an ISA program, we have started during the COVID pandemic, started a call, a tender, that had two different frame of application. The first one is health, as you mentioned, and the second one is education using remote communication and utilization of space technologies. The target are all the economic operators within Europe. In particular, we use the ESA ARTES bus program. The result was very good. We started with an initial amount of funding, and in particular, we requested also co-funding done by the economic operator that should have made proposal to us. In particular, the requirement were 50%, 50 from large industries and only 20% from SMEs, university, and center of research. We received a lot of proposals, 85 for the health part and 13 for remote education. So this obliged us, and we were very happy to do this, to increase our funding from 2.5 million up to 10 million. So we have multiplied by 4 the initial investment. As I said before, the topics are health, and when we talk about health, we had in mind social assistance, support to activities of doctors, security and monitoring, telemedicine, epidemiology, and resource planning. With a lot of projects that I don't mention to you because otherwise it will be too long. And also a very important part for education. We attribute a very great importance to education in general in Asia, and this was mainly devoted to e-learning for laboratories on board the International Space Station, giving the possibility of doing something directly from home in space, and then hybrid telecommunication using ground system and satellite to reduce the digital divide in some area where there is no good link with the ground networks.
All right, thank you very much, Augusto, for this overview. So going a little bit deep on what's happening in Italy and maybe a point on the initiatives of the Amaldi Foundation. So last year, the Amaldi Foundation has co-founded a space finance observatory with the Lewis University that has also been appointed as ESA Lab. So my question would be, why an observatory on such a specific vertical, and what type of activities will be carrying out?
Just switch off. Okay, it's working. Okay, yes. Thank you, Eleonora. Why a space finance observatory? Okay, the main reason. Okay, I can't find the main reason in the answers we received today. I mean that talking about the state of health of startups in the space field during the 2020 means, of course, talking about resilience, about innovation in Italy, in Europe, all over the world. Both themes are interesting for Lewis University, which is a private university established by the Industrial Association, Italian Industrial Association, and also for the Fondazione Edoardo Amaldi, which scope is to foster the technology transfer processes in Italy, starting from the space tech sector. But there is something more, I guess. I mean, I received a lot of inputs in this discussion. A lot more, I suppose, and I want to underline that establishing a center for space finance was related to the need to understand how support space tech under a financial point of view. I mean, some months ago, I had the chance to read an article written by Mark Andreessen. It's quite famous, but probably I have to explain who this guy is. He's the co-founder of Andreessen Horowitz, which is, I guess, the fourth venture capital fund in the world, like almost 20 billion euro managed, 18.8, something like that. So what Mark write as impact by itself, you know. This article was representing the concerning of Mark Andreessen about how the Western democracies have failed both in preventing the risk of the COVID-19 pandemic and how to manage this kind of risk. It's something, you know, interesting now to recall because of what Augusto just said. I mean, Andreessen said that there were like two failures. The first one was a failure in terms of imagination, because about the risk about a pandemic caused by a coronavirus was, now we are like aware that was something, you know, that the whole scientific community knew as possible or probable. We can, you know, remember this interview of Bill Gates' interview in 2015, but a lot of movies talking about a specific topic. So a failure of imagination in preventing the problem and a failure on implementation in the containment of the spread. Now we can say, at least for the Italian experience, but I suppose it's, you know, wider, that space and space startups demonstrated they fully potential into not imagining the problem, probably, but into provide a kind of implementation, a quick implementation. I'm referring especially to this action that the Italian Space Agency wanted to launch. It's something, you know, certainly true for the downstream sector, but it's something, you know, true also for the upstream sector, I suppose, at least in terms of potentially. And I think it is the reason why the trend, as Manny said, does, and our investigation, let's say, demonstrate too, is completely different for space sector, no? Despite the pandemic, investments had the chance to grow, and startups reach new success. So I suppose that our role is to, as analysts or counselors, is to encourage and to help institutions in better address their actions and to verify the impact of their concrete initiatives. This is the main reason, I guess, to set up an observatory on space finance.
All right, thank you very much, Lorenzo. So I would start a second round of questions. So now we have, let's say, a complete overview of what's happening globally at European level and at Italian level. So going back to Manny, what do you think are the main opportunities now in 2021 for the space startups globally?
Yeah, that's a good question. Maybe I'll add what main challenges are to that. And I'll start with the challenges, perhaps. Broadly speaking, that there are technical challenges, commercial and regulatory at a high level in terms of what startups need to overcome in order to deliver. On the technical side, I think the space industry is particularly capable, and a lot of strong talent is able to come together to come up with amazing innovations that we all see are impacting our daily lives. And so that, I think, is a strong asset of the space community, and startup space companies particularly focused on in a commercial way, to that, with the idea being that, you know, they need to be revenue generating, and an aspect of that where governments can support is the early stage contracts, providing the revenue. So not just grants and R&D funding, but actual, here's some money, can you provide that service to us? So that kind of sets a statement of intent and helps to build the confidence of the company. And when they're going out to other customers, they can see that, oh, your government is your customer, then we might be able to be your customer as well. So it's kind of building that ecosystem to support the startups, and on the regulatory side as well, to ease the burden and the pressure that might be there. So just wanted to quickly touch on the challenges, but in terms of the opportunities, we saw what the trends are in terms of the investment that's being raised. That was kind of icing on the cake in a way, because we've seen in 2021 a number of, and 2020, a number of SPACs emerge. So SPACs are special purpose acquisition companies, and that is another mechanism whereby companies go public by being acquired by an already public company. So I won't kind of bore you with how it all works, but essentially it is a fast-track way for companies to get onto the public markets, and that has seen substantial growth and is creating new opportunities in terms of investors who are interested in exit opportunities. So the trends that we saw, like from 5-6 years ago, the typical investment horizon is about 5 to 7 years, and generally we see that in the space sector it tends to be a bit longer, but given that it's highly capital intensive industry, and you know, investors understand that you're not going to get the same returns that you do in a .com company or internet company as you will space in the time frame that they would expect. But we are starting to see some of these exits take place in the space sector, and we've seen some SPACs such as Virgin Galactic being the first one in recent times, and a number of others that have been announced, Spire, Planet, etc. And those are opportunities from the startup side in terms of the capital available to be able to deliver on their plans. And then also in terms of expanding the opportunity set for these companies. So some of these SPAC companies are now able to, so they've raised hundreds of millions of dollars each at any given time through these SPACs. And that is essentially a giant war chest that they can use to speed up their development plans, acquire companies to support their growth, and we've seen some M&A activity take place around that. So Spire acquired ExactEarth being an example. And that again is kind of helping to grow that ecosystem and create a bit of a maturity around the opportunities for the sector. So hopefully that covers some of the opportunities, but I'm sure I missed some.
Yeah, thank you very much. We can go a little bit deeper on the European ecosystem, because Mani just mentioned what would be the opportunities globally. So we know that ESA has a main role in supporting the space startups ecosystem. So what is the way forward that ESA is paving for the space startups? So of course it's for Luca.
Yeah, no, thanks a lot. Maybe just before addressing this, I would like to nuance a little bit what Mani just said about SPAC. It's a phenomenon that we are looking quite closely, let's say at our side as well, because it's impacting European companies nowadays. It's true, absolutely true, that it is a quite fast way, let's say, to raise a lot of capitals. But I like also patience for some time to time, and I'm not sure, let's say, that this is always the good recipe. And in certain cases, this is, you know, with respect to an IPO, this is a much faster way. But an IPO allows for a much deeper due diligence. And this SPAC vehicle, it's may hide in the long term some nasty surprise. So this is why we are a bit cautious, and also, let's say, I'm working for a regional type of agency. So of course we are a bit protectionist of our ecosystem, and we are also worried that, let's say, this is also a vehicle to pump out in some way some know-how and knowledge that has been developed in European companies. So let's say there are positive side, but also some points of attention that we are keeping an eye on. Now, coming to your question, sorry, but I think that it's a very important point, that the one that you're raising. Thanks a lot, Mario.
Yeah, no, that's a very good point around, it's not just the benefits of SPAC. There's a lot of challenges, and you see these projections that are being made around pretty insane targets, if I may say so, for some of them. I think one company says they'll have one launch a day, and so there needs to be a bit of realism added to those projections as well. So yeah, completely agreed on that.
Okay, so now the role of ESA in this period, let's say also in recovering the situation for startup. Startup has been affected, of course, because you know, I mean, when you are looking for capitals and you are confined home, or for customers as well, it's not that easy. At the same time, startup usually also have very low operational costs. So, and in certain cases, they are in many cases they're working on software, so they have been in somewhere less affected than projected. Larger company working in particular in assembly, integration, and testing, manufacturing in general, or let's say reliant on a supply chain, they were definitely more impacted on that. It's clear that several of them has disappeared, but it's also clear that, as many was mentioning before, crisis sometimes is also hiding opportunities. And we have seen, and Augusto also was mentioning that we have launched together with ASI some call for ideas and new projects. We have seen many good, very good companies emerging from nowhere during the COVID period, proposing new ways to address pandemics, of monitoring the spreading of the epidemic, and nowadays are also developing, let's say, adapted tool for health or other type of devices that today also find employment in fields, in domains, in industrial verticals far away from space. So typical case of spin-off. So I think that there was many good surprises in that period. Now, coming to the role of ESA, of course, ESA, as the first goal that we had was to ensure continuity of flow, of cash flow, and also never interrupting procurement actions, otherwise it would have been catastrophic. So we have put in place a number of measures, and nevertheless, altogether, European industry, I think, had lost for about 1.5 billion euros last year. So that was less than projected in terms of revenues. So when it comes to the action, let's say, that we should do in the long term, I would say basically these are grouped in three main pillars. That's talent, as usual. I mean, we have seen disappearing many critical skills during this period. It's true that the future, or the new normal, or the next normal, requires also different type of skills. So the future of the work is now currently under assessment. We had several workshops also with our member states, with industry and the OECD, to try to understand what are the professional profile that we will need in the future. So talent is certainly one. The second one is investment, is capital. So we said before we have a problem of volume and flow. I don't want to repeat that, but when you want to attract capital, I mean, there is the old motto in business that is time is money. So this brings me to the third part, that is time. So we have been patient, but now we have to accelerate. And so we have to put in place the adapted framework to allow our industry to explore new commercial concepts in an agile framework, fast. And in order to do that, ESA has to develop different roles with respect to the traditional role of an R&D procurement agency. That is certainly we will continue to be, but if we want to help our companies, we have also to become an enabler. This means create the right conditions in terms of providing technical support, providing access to our technical facilities, and encouraging the networking opportunities with the investors, risk capital, private equities funds, venture capitals. A role of accelerator by allowing an industry to make its own development at its own pace with its own rules without over-imposing our administrative burdens. And the third role that was also mentioned by many before, the one that is fundamental of customer. But a real customer could be an anchor tenant, can be a first customer, but certainly this is something that reassures the potential investors. The important thing is that the addressable market is large enough and that we the public sector, we do not remain the single only customer. So these are the three actions that I think we need to improve.
All right, thank you very much, Luca. So one key topic of investments would also be the deal flow. So for Italy, so for Augusto, what do you think would be the strategy to boost the number and the quality of startups? So the strategies that both the European Union and the Italian Space Agency should reinforce to boost this quality and number of companies working in the space sector.
Yes, okay. The scenario, as has been said, has drastically changed, and we have new drivers, and we have to take into account also the reality. Luca explained very well the difference between private investment in USA and in Europe. So we have to do something, and we have to shape our strategy accordingly in order to push and to support also, in particular, the startup. Italy and the Italian Space Agency normally works in three areas: a national level, a European level with ESA and the European Union through the European Union programs for space, and also through bilateral cooperation or multilateral cooperation with other actors worldwide. So, in particular, I would like to say that we have been obliged to change a little bit our strategy in order to pursue the right development and the right support to the startup in particular. And what I can say is that maybe Italy was one of the precursors in this way, because I remember that already in 2014-15, when we were discussing with the European Commission, we suggested to take into account, for example, within the Research and Innovation Framework Program Horizon 2020, to support in particular the startup and the SMEs. This was done through the European Union instrument, SME instrument in particular. And I've met during this day Italian companies that had the opportunity to use this funding, and they have created really very good products that were showing to me. So I'm very happy that since at that time Italy was already pushing the European Commission toward the support and the creation, and also to support the scale-up of startup, because it is also important, because we have to avoid to abandon them after the first initial funding. Regarding European Union, again, clearly we are working with the European Commission in order to identify which are the more correct way of funding startup and to provide additional funding. The European Union in particular has now started in the new framework program the Cassini initiative that will cover all the area, space area of the European space program, and is going to cover both upstream and downstream. The budget is around 1 billion and will cover a lot of different way of funding, seed and crowdfunding, prizes, accelerator, partnership. But also I would like to mention what is very important in this initiative. There is also in-orbit demonstration and validation that for us, for Italy in particular, we again, approximately 7-8 years ago, we were the country that was proposing to the European Union to provide funding for in-orbit demonstration and validation, because this is the barrier very often for startup and SMEs and spin-off of university, because to have a demonstration in space has a cost. And through the funding of the European Union, at the beginning through Horizon 2020 and now in Cassini in the new Horizon Europe program, there is the possibility to be selected to go on orbit and to demonstrate its own product technology on system. So we are working very closely with the European Union to continue to support this kind of thing. At Italian level, as Luca has said, there is the need now to accelerate, otherwise we will lose the pace. So I mentioned before the ESA business incubator centers in Lazio. Don't want to spend too much time, but just to say that it works very well. It is working since 10 years. We had the 44 projects that has been funded. 30 startups have been graduated. Now we have 10 startups that are working in this incubator, 22 patents, but okay, without giving too much number, because otherwise I will take too much time. What else we are doing? So I covered the European Union and these are through the BIC, the incubator center. We will now start a new incubator center in Turin, in Regione Piemonte. But also within ASI, now we are starting with a very important initiative. One, for example, is so-called I4DP, that means Innovation for Downstream Preparation. This is something that will start before the end of this year, hopefully. And this will support, again, added value new services based on space system, and also the utilization of Galileo, Copernicus, telecommunication system, but also in particular integrated application. This is for a number of possible examples based on the real need of the needs. In Italy, we are very strong attention to which are the needs of the users, because services has to be developed according to the real needs. So we are working with institutional users and also commercial users. Italian Space Agency also supported the creation of the so-called is a fund, the Primo Space Fund. This was one of the first fund in Europe, always with the objective to support startup. The first project was focused on low TRL startup. And last but not least, recovery fund to fight the problem created by COVID. In our recovery fund that is now still under finalization, we are also preparing initiative and action in order to provide funding and support to startups. So this covers more or less. So our strategy is now focused very well on startups that, as I said at the beginning, in Italy are very numerous. And
thank you very much, Augusto. So just a couple of minutes for one last question to Lorenzo. So we said before, the Amaldi Foundation has established this Space Finance Lab. So what have been the main outcomes and activities carried out during the first year?
Okay, we are clearly running out of time. I just wanted to show some numbers quickly, but there is no presentation now. Okay, the main, I don't know if it's possible to launch it. Okay. During the calamitous year of 2020, European startups, space tech startups, and in general the European space tech sector recorded a new high in terms of both VC investments and turnover. This is okay, it's there. It's something that also Manny confirmed through his report. And but what is interesting, I guess, is to jump. This is, you know, the same analysis divided for European countries. Okay, Italy unfortunately is not listed yet. The interesting thing, I suppose, to think about is something that we were commenting 2 days ago when I asked you if there was a bubble, coming bubble, you know, in the space tech sector under a financial point of view. And I prepared a slide just to okay. Oh. Here we are. Because it's something, you know, quite, we are quite conscious, we can read it in every report, that there are a lot of investments in the last year especially, but there are no exits. So the question is, there is a bubble, or we have to wait for a bubble, because of course we are like talking about people, young entrepreneurs, investors, to put money to believe in this sector, and we are not offering many ways to understand data. I guess that one of the big mistakes is to confuse the space sector with the digital sector. Just because a big part in the space sector is played by downstream, with a great commercial success, especially during the COVID-19. This is the reason why in our report we thought it was a good idea to compare the space sector with the deep tech sector. Our report will be available for free, and I have to thank my colleague here, in the next few weeks. Anyway, comparing the deep tech sector and the space sector, we can see that, especially in the previous one, okay, they are more or less similar verticals, similar sectors. So there is not probably a bubble coming. But I wish. No, they have no time to know. Okay, so offline.
Offline.
Sorry.
All right, thank you very much for attending, and we will be available offline for continuing the discussion. Thank you.